Alrighty, folks, what is the one rental at a time community saying? What are the haters and the spicy comments? What are the comments I really should go deeper on instead of my 1 or 2 word answers? The great Millennial Mike scours your comments and produces a list for me to go through. So, Mike, it still amazes me that you're willing to do this each and every week. I appreciate you. The audience appreciates you. Let's get going.
Yeah, no, it's one of my favorite segments that we do because there's a lot of good questions down there. A lot of people have things they want to ask you or hateful things they want to say, and we just jump right in. So,
Yeah, let's go.
So today we're going to be starting with a conversation that you had with Jonathan Twombly. And this one is, are you a crash bro or not? So it comes from Karthik V20. He says, make up your mind. The last video you made with Housing Wire's Logan, you were all bullish, but now you're talking about oversupply and an upcoming buying opportunity. So are you a bear or are you a bull on the housing market, Mike?
Oh, gosh. I don't know how to respond to idiots. Well, here's the deal. If you're talking to Logan from Housing Wire, you are clearly talking about single family homes. And if you're talking to Jonathan Twombly, a very large syndicator, you are talking about commercial multifamily buildings. And if you are too stupid to realize they are different, you are not paying attention. So you can have an opinion about housing going up, being flat, transactions down, and a opinion about commercial being a tremendous generational wealth buying opportunity. Both of those statements can be true. And if you're too stupid to figure it out, I can't help you. That's my answer.
Yeah, people seem to not understand the fact that the two different assets can behave differently. And where there may be
not only can, I documented this in my book, One Rental at a Time. This has happened before, right? I bought houses 2002 to 2006. Housing got stupid. Unlike the Crash Bros, they did something. I sold all of my 8 houses and bought apartments. This is not new. This is never has happened before. This is a repeatable process that I'm trying to bring to the world. And if you are too silly to understand the nuances, I can't help you.
You know, all I heard in that story was that in 2007, you were a crash bro, but you were at least right. So you're 1 for 1, and you have a better record than the current crash bros.
There you go. Not only that, I did something. These crash bros are renters. They're failed mortgage brokers, and they are nothing but creators of doom porn. And if Karthik wants to go watch them, go watch them. I don't care. I'm not in the convincing business. I'm in the action taking and making moves business. So there you go, Karthik.
Well, let's change topic to something that's just a little bit more procedural. This is a tax question somebody has on 1031. So this one comes from, and this may not be the real Dr. Dre, but it comes from Dr. Dre, 4391.
Dr. Dre.
Hey, you know what?
I think you're good.
If he's watching your channel, you've hit a new level of success, Mike. That's all I'm saying. He says, so you're saying roll them over into a new property. I'm facing the end of the 27.5 year on 3 properties in the next 2 years. Don't you still just prolong and compound the taxes when you do sell, or when you die, and do your heirs have to pay off the taxes?
So again, talk to an accountant, all of those usual caveats. As I understand the process, having done 1031 exchanges, and unfortunately going to die at some point, this is what I believe happens. So I buy a building 27.5 years ago. The cost basis is now 0. I can sell that building via a 1031 exchange and go bigger and start the depreciation over. That is the magic of the 1031. What happens when I die? Well, at least as it's currently written, my heirs will get what's called a stepped up basis. And the magic of not paying that 1031 back is done. It's the ultimate FU to the IRS. It's called, and it's not really an exit I'm looking forward to, but we all go through it. So that is how I understand the implications. Let's be clear. A lot of the billionaire real estate guys, that's all they do. They start small and they keep 1031ing up, so the depreciation gets reset and they start to take some of that phantom expense. It's a path to getting really, really rich.
Yeah, the 1031 is very powerful. And at some point, I will probably 1031 out of some of my single family houses and into mid-sized multi-units, but not there yet.
It'll happen. I know it will.
So here's a great conceptual question that seems to be something that exists out there in the real estate zeitgeist. And this is it always harder today than it used to be? So this one comes from Mike N5. He says, loving the long form Three Amigos, just got under contract on a fourplex last week. Yield is not what it would have been 3 years ago, but it's a lot better than the other two on the market on the same street, and it'll cash flow 7%. I'm looking to sell a single family that I bought 2 years ago, take that equity and put it into another fourplex. It's definitely not as easy as it was in 2021 and earlier, but I remember in 2021 thinking that it was harder than it was in 2019. So I think that feeling is just always there, and it always feels like you have to overpay when the prices go up from what they used to be. Has there ever been a time, Mike, where you thought, wow, it's way easier today than it was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Something that I've tried to share, and I really like that you picked this question, is and I've tried to say this, but it's really hard for folks in the moment to really feel it. It's always hard. The hard changes. The hard changes. So for example, in 2010, 11, 12, based on whatever your market was doing, prices were crazy low, probably, at least in most of the country. Most of you look at that situation not having the ability to go, take advantage of it and just naturally think it was easier. I want you to hear this. Better yet, I want you to feel this. It was harder in 10, 11, 12, based on your market, to get a deal done. Now, how can that be given prices were so much lower? Lenders were not lending. I had lenders tell me at the time we were worth 7 figures. We both had 800 credit scores. We both had 6-figure jobs. And we both had great relationships with the bank. They told us, hell no, we were part of the problem. So banks turned off. So we had to go establish at the time hard money. We were paying 12%, 3 points, and having to put 35% down. Right? It's a different kind of hard. And a lot of people don't understand that. And oh, by the way, it was short-term money. We were talking 1, 2, 3 years. Right. And the units were destroyed. So again, it's always hard. I wish people would stop looking at price. Now, what I did like in that comment is he was talking yield. That's the only number that matters. In 2010, in my market, I would not accept anything less than 15 because I was paying 12% interest. Right. It's a totally different ballgame. Right. I would take a deal today at 8. Right. I would take a yield in my market today at 8%. And I'm going to figure out Vegas here coming up, and it'll be a different number. But you could only the whole magic of one rental at a time for 20 years is I do a great deal in the market I have, not the market I wish I had. That's the magic. You could only deal with the market you have. You can't wish for an old one. You can't pretend like it's different. It is what it is. Do great deals. It's always hard.
Yeah, it's funny because as somebody like you who's had a YouTube channel since 2017, 2018, and I've followed the comments for years, it's funny. In the comment section, over and over again, you can't buy something today. It's impossible. You're just not able to do it. 2, 3 years later, man, I wish I just bought back whenever that first comment came on. And you could literally just chunk the comments out year by year by year and keep looking back. People will find an excuse no matter what. So do what works for you.
Yep.
All righty, let's shift on to the economy. We got a couple of questions about the economy. Number one, are we looking at a new normal for foreclosures? This one comes from Hank Duncan, 2665. He says, Mike, are you of the opinion that we are living in a new normal and foreclosures will not return to their long-term averages?
I think, again, I don't know what the long-term average is, but I think what they're pointing at is something I have believed and have talked about. I believe banks, and let me be very clear. This is owner-occupied stuff. This is not DSCR loans. This is not investor loans. This is certainly not commercial. This is owner-occupied is what I'm about to talk about. We have learned very clearly that banks will bend over backwards to not even start a foreclosure via what's called forbearance. In fact, I think last week, or maybe it's been 2 or 3 weeks ago now, they've rolled out an extension of, if you can believe it, the COVID forbearance. We're in 2024, and they're talking about extending the 2020 2020 tools. And oh, by the way, did they not only extend them, they added net new tools. So it is of my belief that banks will use forbearance at the whiff of a problem. And thus, any wave of foreclosures would be extended out. If it took 1,000 days last time, it'll take 1,200 days this time. So I just don't see how owner occupied go back to, the '08 timeframe and we're doing 2 or 3 million foreclosures. It's not coming. We will undoubtedly have foreclosures. People die, people get addicted to drugs, bad stuff happens. We will have foreclosures. In fact, we're seeing foreclosures in the Southwest Florida right now from the Hurricane Ian that was 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
What people don't realize is foreclosures take time. And we're 2 years past Ian and stuff is just showing up now. I wish people would realize that. So I don't know the normal time frame. All I would say is banks clearly have starting to adopt forbearance as a net new tool to allow owner occupied breathing room to try to fix their situation, get a job, do something like that. So the banks have new tools. They are not going to repeat the last crisis. The last crisis I lived through, I was in it. Last time the bank said, we can't help you until you were 90 days late. Guess what? Everybody went 90 days late. We have a problem. Today, you call up a bank or you go on their website, you click a couple of flags, and you've got a 90-day extension or a 90-day forbearance. It's just wildly different. So I believe banks are acting fundamentally different.
Hopefully they learned a little bit of a lesson from last time. Moving on to another question about the economy. This one's about wages versus inflation, and it comes from Richard DeFries, 4484. He says, wages are the last to catch up to monetary inflation. While corporations win out on high prices, we lose out until they have eaten their lion's share. Then they shave off some scraps for us. He sounds a little frustrated. Mike, question for you. Are wages the last thing to catch up when inflation is occurring?
I don't know that that historically holds water. And again, well, let me step back. If you're looking at nominal, the answer is no. But given he's talking about inflation, he's probably referring to real. Remember, there's a difference between nominal and real. Basically, you take a nominal number, you subtract inflation, and that becomes real. So I think what Richard is talking about is real wages. In that case, he's likely correct. However, a lot of folks just look at their nominal wages, and we saw crazy wage growth as inflation was taking off. So, but yeah, I think where Richard was going, now that I kind of processed the question, real wage growth is last, but it's also lagging. What do I mean by that? During the last 2 years, we had negative real wage growth. However, for the last, I think it's 18 months, we've had real wage growth. In fact, last Friday, we got February's numbers, and real wage growth was up like 2%. So I think real wage growth will continue as we move forward. So it is definitely lagging. I'm going to guess he was talking about real wages. So yeah, that's a fair comment, I think.
So another question when it comes to wages, considering this is a channel on housing and rental properties, one of the arguments that constantly gets made when young people in my generation, the millennial generation, claim that it's harder to get started now than it was for boomers is that the relative wage versus the cost of a house, that it used to be 30, 40 years ago, your yearly wage times 3 or 4 was the cost of a house, but now your yearly wage is times 7 or 8 to get a house. How do you think that factors in towards which generation had it harder to get started in housing?
Well, Pretty Chart Boy has poisoned the community. Pretty Chart Boy in Mom's Basement, who is a renter, has gotten people to think that the only measure that matters is price and income. That only matters if everybody pays cash for a home. We don't do that here in America. Frankly, we don't do that in most of the country. So what you should be asking yourself is, what is price of home, income, and interest rates? It's basically affordability. People buy on payment. So the reason this is important is Pretty Chart Boy, if you just look at income and price, would have told you that 2020 was one of their worst years to buy a home. However, if you're smarter than a doorknob, you will realize that 2020 was the second best year to buy a home. That should cause the price and income to disappear. Second, if you look at the worst year ever to buy a home, it was 1981. It's not 2023. It's 1981. 1981 was remarkably worse than today. It was the worst affordability ever. And if you look at the income to price, it was actually a good time to buy. So again, this price to income pretty chart boy metric is used to scare people who are not very smart. We buy on payment. Now, in 2024, it's bad. I would argue it's really bad. But let's at least talk about all the metrics: price, income, and interest rates. And lastly, for those that think today is the worst ever, no, it was the early 80s. The early 80s were way worse than today. So get over yourself.
Hey, man, there's no time like the present, and everybody likes to be the center of attention. So, all right, couple questions left. We're going to end with Grant Cardone talking about bank failures. But before we get there, I want to go to a question that you asked of your viewers, which was, what was their greatest fear? And this was a couple of weeks ago. It was prior to your event, and I haven't had a chance to get these questions to you. So this was kind of a two main fears that popped up. So the first one comes from BAMK0000. He says, my greatest fear is price appreciation like Canada, which will prevent my children or grandchildren from buying houses. And the second one, same idea. Jordan Marshall 56 says, my biggest fear is a crash up so brutal that rentals become hard to afford and home ownership, like you said, dips below 50%. So it seems like most people's greatest fear is that it's going to become unaffordable and more unaffordable for average people to buy houses. What's your advice to them? Do you see that happening? What should we do?
I remember that video because I think that really spawned from a conversation that Anna Kelly and I had had before that. And to be clear, I think I said it, that's my greatest fear as well. My greatest fear, again, I'm not saying it's likely, it is possible, is what I'll call renter nation. And to me, renter nation is home ownership is less than 50%. Last I saw was 63%. So we're still within the range of being okay. But yeah, I think Canada was an excellent point. People look at the United States and say, hey, we're unaffordable. But do yourself a favor, go look at Canada. Canada says, hold my beer. Like, really? I mean, it's like way worse than in the, I mean, like, go look at the charts. It's, you want to see problem? Go look at Canada's affordability. It's way, hold my beer is the only thing I can think of. That is concerning. I believe, in the middle class. I believe in strengthening the middle class. I believe the path to getting wealthy is owning assets for the long term. It's frightening. Now, I believe the system that we are in is self-regulating. I believe I'm highlighting things that could be early but net positive, smaller homes. I believe builders are going to build smaller homes. I believe the McMansions of the 90s and 2000, where we saw average square foot at 2,500, is already reversing. We saw it come down to about 2,100 in 2023. I'm hoping it breaks below 2,000 in 2024. We don't need all of that. And as if we can get smaller, prices will come in. That's just how math will work. So it's definitely a concern. I'm afraid of it as well.
I noticed that type of thinking is a major concern for a lot of people nationwide. I watch lots of financial videos. I watch lots of content online, and people talk about over and over how income inequality is increasing, unaffordability is increasing. And yet people still play their games, smoke weed, eat fast food, and they don't do the work. So how afraid are you really? When I see your commenters in your video and I see the names saying that these are their biggest fear, all I can say is I see these same names commenting on all these different videos, talking about their successes, talking about the work they're putting in, because they actually believe that it's on them to make a better life for themselves. So at least with this channel and the people who are watching this, they're trying to take action against that greatest fear.
Yeah, I mean, the rat race is real. And if you're, let me say it this way. We're all in the rat race, at least at some point of our life. If you're happy, dude, you won. I'm not going to judge. If you're happy, You've won life. Most of you watching this channel, it's not for you. And the path is very clear. It is really clear. You got to live below your means. You got to create disposable income, and you got to buy assets that cash flow for a decade. I bring you 15, 20 different people a month. It's that process. Now, they got there at different ways and different steps in different markets, but the basic building blocks of getting out of the rat race are exactly the same. It takes a decade. It sucks the first 5 years because you don't have momentum, and it's the trickle is you can barely see it. One broken water heater cancels it all out.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm sorry. The first 5 years suck. The next 5 years are pretty good. The next 50 years are amazing.
And let me attest to that as somebody who just closed out on his first 5 years and is now starting his second 5 years. Things are looking up. I can tell you that, certainly from a cash flow and rent appreciation perspective.
Amen.
All
Good
right.
for you.
Very last question. This was interesting. Grant Cardone sat down and did another interview with London Real on the London Real podcast. And they were talking about a few different things. And something that kind of struck me as interesting was Grant Cardone recently said that he believes over the next 12 months, he thinks we're going to see 300 more bank failures. 300. Do you think that's possible? A bunch of small, mid-sized banks just crashing left and right?
So I saw that interview, and I think and to be clear, if you say failures and acquisitions, because again, failure means the Fed got involved or FDIC got involved, but there could be, if you also include acquisitions, I don't know if I would say 12 months, but if you said 18 months, so if you just extended the duration a little bit, I don't think that's crazy. That's about 8%, 7%, because I think we have about 5,000 banks. It is really possible. There's a lot of small community banks that are over-indexed on multifamily and office in their backyard. I mean, look at New York Community Bank Corp. They had two rather large buildings notes that were basically restricted on rents. The assets are worth 50% of the loan. That's enough to take that bank, and they had to get $1 billion lifeline from Steve Mnuchin. So to Grant's point, I don't think that's a crazy comment. I might want to extend it to 18 months, but yeah, I think that might happen.
Well, the good news is for everybody watching, if that is the case and we do move through that process, you'll be able to see it covered here in detail, much like Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank and all those other ones were right here on this channel. Mike, that's all the questions I had for you this week.
You're amazing, man. I appreciate you. Thanks for everything.
Of course.
Oh, let's see the belt. You got the belt on the desk.
Oh,
what is that?
Dude, in case you didn't know, I am the champion right here. Yeah, I won this thing at an event that I spoke at recently. You might have heard of it. It was called the One Rental at a Time live event in Vegas. Greatest of all time. The double champ does what he wants.
Belt. I love it. All right, folks, take care of yourself. Thanks again.